one of the most inspirational people that I know. She's very posh, but she swears a lot. The first time I spoke to her properly was talking about just a bit of bullying that I was getting, and she talked about the shitty committee and how you ignore them. And I thought, actually, that's so important, because we've all got a bit of a shitty committee on our shoulders, whether it's just somebody who doesn't like us in a shop or something that's bigger that's having an impact. And Julia's been incredible. She's got the most amazing podcast you all should download and listen to. She's the calmest person I think I know. Maybe she's not always as calm as she seems, but it's about how we can't change a lot of what we do, but we can change how it affects us, and I think that's the most important thing. We've heard some great talks today. Obviously the first one was great, but the other two have been great. But there's a lot that happens physically in our bodies that we can't control. There's a lot that happens externally that we can't control. And someone once said to me, you should glance back and look forwards, and that's a great thing to do, but it's not always easy. And when we've got menopause, perimenopause, hormonal changes, it can be really catastrophic. And obviously hormones are great, but they're not going to sort out our brain completely. So I just really want to get as much information in 20 minutes or so from Julia. How can we cope with life, because there's so much going on, and how can we focus on getting our brains to be as happy and positive, because positivity is so important, not just for us but for others around us as well. So
easy questions to answer in
really
a few minutes. So I think, what you've all been saying is obviously incredibly important, is lifestyle of. So for all of you, if you think about yourself as a mind-body unit, everything that you put into your mind affects your body, and everything you put into your body affects your mind. And the two are thought of as one unit now. And so what you watch, who you listen to, what you eat, how much you move, who you spend time with, who you don't spend time with, how much sex you have, and also what the messaging is in your head will influence your well-being. And so the first kind of step is an audit inside yourself of what is influencing me. If you get to a shitty committee when you have this very critical voice, is that being influenced by, when you were looking at those 50s adverts, first of all, if you think of yourself in relation to your health, to your fertility, to your sexuality, and how you are as a woman in the world, or a man in the world, what were your grandparents' beliefs about health and women, sexuality and fertility? So think about because often what gets passed down in patterns and beliefs are unconsciously in us and influence us. So what did your parents believe about that? What did your parents believe about health, sexuality, fertility? And in your family, what was allowed to be talked about around those issues and what wasn't allowed to be talked about? Did you talk about periods? Did your mother talk about her menopause? Could you talk about sex? Could you talk about the moods that you were in? Did you have emotions? In my family, we weren't allowed to have emotions. They were kind of just not done. And so you had to just always put on a show. And we talked about everything that didn't matter and nothing that mattered. So everything that was going on was below the waterline that was really important. And you really only kind of were given tiny cues about what people talked about, which really gave me no information at all, which is what led me to be a therapist. But so I think, when someone walks through my door, they want an instant solution for the present and their future. So your idea of looking back, first of all, look back and understand for yourself what are the foundational beliefs that you've inherited. So what has been passed down from generation to generation. Not only what are those beliefs, but what are the patterns with emotions. So that within families, we come from a family system, and there are no perfect families. We all come from imperfect families, sort of doing our best. And we are on a spectrum of kind of very dysfunctional and functional, depending what the internal stresses are and the external stresses. But when you're under internal stress, which may be menopause or perimenopause, external stress that might be work, or your teenage children kicking off, or your parent being ill, or a war, or all that's been going on in the world. What are the first coping mechanisms? What are your default coping mechanisms that you learned from your parents how to deal with it? Was it to get busy? Was it to eat? Was it to drink? Was it to anaesthetize your emotions? So in the way that you've been talking about hormones, emotions are transmitters of information that come into our mind to give us information, oi, something is up. And if you block the transmission of the information, if you don't know what that emotion is telling you, that I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel confused, you suppress it, you then block it. So I was thinking about Lindsay, and I was thinking about, of course she wasn't listened to effectively about her hormones, but also there was something that happened where her symptoms were overridden by what was going on internally. So we didn't really hear, we didn't know what were the messages that were going up into her mind, telling her something is up. And she knew it was biochemical, but no one was listening. And she wasn't able to listen to herself. So in some ways, your best preventative medicine is being aware of what your default mode coping mechanisms are. What did you learn from your parents and your grandparents? And what are the ones that actually work effectively, and which are the ones that you want to expand? And also, which ones do you not want to pass down to the generation below you?
That's really hard as a parent of 3 children. I know my insecurities and I know my personality well enough, and there's bits that I really don't want my children to have, but they're usually the ones that they have and you can see, and that can be really difficult. But I think also there's this whole thing that I said about the adverts in the 50s, but it's no different really. I was looking at one advert last night, and there was a woman and she was behind bars, but they weren't bars, there was a broom and there was a mop and something else, and it was like, how do we help these women? And it was another benzo advert. But there's this whole thing that is quite convenient for society for us to be invisible as women. We're a bit of a nuisance because we can be a bit gobby and we can be a bit hormonal and a bit emotional, and we like to sort of stand our ground, and now we all want to work, we don't want to hide behind our aprons. So generationally things have really changed. But in society it can be quite difficult sometimes. And do you have any advice like how we can not be invisible but not be annoying either? Because there is this thing in a sort of board or a meeting, if a man says something, and this is a generalisation, it really is, but it's like, that's a great idea. If a woman says something, it's like, oh, here she goes again. And how do we change? Is it our body language? Is it our tone of voice? Is it...
So I think, I mean, if you first want to think about societal changes, and also changes in your life, that the event that has changed, that 50% of women now work, the internal process to adapt to the change, getting married, having a baby, moving house, losing a job, ending a relationship, that can happen overnight or very fast. The psychological adjustment takes much, much longer than the event. And so society, we have kind of had the change in the laws that allow us to work and all of those things that support us. But psychologically, we've been much slower to catch up. And I think when you're thinking about how we change ourselves so that we're heard, probably the single best aspect of communication is our capacity to listen. You know, there is so much transmitting going on and so little receiving. And if we really want someone to hear us, I think our best, and it sounds a bit like passive women, but I do think if we listen to someone, they begin to trust us. We begin to form a kind of expanding the bandwidth of understanding with each other, and then they will begin to listen to us. So if you think you're communicating with someone, every difference between you and the person you're communicating with is a potential barrier to understanding. So if it's a different education, different gender, different age, different religion, different background, different socioeconomic, you know, all the differences, So first of all, when you're communicating, be aware of what the differences are. And I think the biggest way to get heard is to slow down and say less. Because if you speak very fast and say a lot, people switch off. But if you decide on one or two things that you really want to get landed in the other person, be very clear, speak quite slowly, and then check with them what they've understood you to say. So I just want to check, not in a kind of robotic way, but I just want to check you've understood, because what I was hoping you got it, and then when they reflect back, that lets you know that they've heard you, and also you then also have a kind of broader base where you've both heard and seen each other.
That's really good advice, and actually for children.
I taught that at St Mary's for 25 years. But I worked in an NHS hospital teaching doctors how to break bad news. I worked in the paediatric and maternity, how to break bad news that children were dying or babies at a time. And so it was telling terrible news, which didn't want to be heard. So I taught them how to, first of all, check with what the person has understood. What have you understood is going on? So if you're in a fight with someone, slow down, step back, lower your cortisol levels, take a breath, check where they are. What have you understood is going wrong? Let me tell you what I think is going wrong, and have a productive fight rather than one that I'm assaulting you with my rightness that is going to beat you, because you'll never get to a conclusion. The only other thing I was going to say, and I know we're going to, because we've got less time, not less time, but we're going to stop soon, is when you were talking about perimenopause and menopause and women being invisible, one of the things I think about is our multiple identities as women and men in the world. And that life is change, and that those that have the capacity to adapt and change in whatever circumstances they have are those that thrive. So people who block change, who build barriers and armour against it, tend to be have more dissatisfaction and have more mental illness, more depression, more anxiety, because they're trying to fight something that they can never win. So if we learn strategies of how to adapt to change, how to support ourselves through change, then we're much likely to have much better outcomes. And thinking about change, I think in this area about longevity, but also to do with women's health and well-being, is that at the centre of every identity, whether it's your gender, your role, whether it's your religion, so all identities are adaptive except those are fixed, like your ethnicity, is the need to be loved and the need to belong. It's a kind of biological need that if I, as a mother, and my mother identity, I need to feel that I belong as a mother, that this is my place as a mother, and that I am loved as a mother. I'm now a mother who has adult children who have left home, who have their own children. So my role as a mother has changed. For that role and that relationship to adapt and grow through those changes, I have to adapt how I'm loved. So loving is not a soft skill. Love is hard work, and sometimes loving is letting go, sometimes it's stepping forward, sometimes it's giving more than you want, sometimes it's giving less than you'd want. But that I am loved as a mother that is stepping back with adult children, and that I still belong in that role as a mother. And that takes a lot of work, because I think often the mistakes we make in families, in offices, societally, is that we get these very fixed ways of being, that I want to be this kind of mother, and I want you to be this kind of child, adult child, and I want my grandchildren to be this type of grandchild. So I used to compete, with parents outside the school about getting GCSEs. Now that I've got adult children, it's like, how many grandchildren you've got? And then it's competition about what schools you're at. It's just like, it just never ends. So you have to kind of come back and just let them be who they are. Do you know what I mean? And accept it. But it's work. So the final thing I'm saying is that to allow that process of change is painful. You know, when everything's going well, we feel comfort. Change is discomfort. Something is up. And so we need two things. We need to find ways of allowing that pain and discomfort to inform us, to let us know what's going on. And we need to develop a toolbox of supports that will enable us to manage the pain and the discomfort. And there's the exercise and your nutrition, but the single biggest thing that will affect all of your outcomes, your entire life, is your love and relationships. The quality of your relationships defines the quality of your life. So while love is not a soft skill, it is the thing that matters most. And it's the thing we tend to deprioritize. You know, I often take my rubbish self home at night, and I've given everyone my best self. And really we need to be thinking, and my kind of most intense relationship is with my phone. And so we need to be thinking about how we hold on to those relationships and how we prioritize relationships and what love really means, because it isn't just words, it is action, and it is a deep understanding of how we communicate it, but also how we allow ourselves to receive it, how we give ourselves permission to be loved as well as to love.
So important, isn't it? I want to just give you a hug. So I know we're running out, but I actually want, because you've been amazing just sitting there, I'd really like to just, if that's okay, open up rather than me just as I've got loads I want to ask you, but I'm privileged I can text all the time because she's attached to her phone, so that's fine. So has anyone got any questions that they want?
I have a question. As a woman, and now a maturing woman, I noticed that in the office or family life, whenever a woman, when you said talk less, I noticed whenever a woman wants to make, to explain something or to make a statement, she never goes directly. It's always a little bit of pre-story. And then a man in the office or in the family life normally loses attention span, interrupts, cuts through, and then creates the unpleasant environment. I just experienced it literally 1 hour and a half ago, where I made a short presentation. It took really, like, I don't know, 130 seconds for a man to listen. Then he interrupted, cut through, and told me what he wanted actually to say. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, would it be better just to go straight and say the end of the, you know, of the message instead of getting into all of this? Because you know, because it's like a project, and you want to say thank you to this person, I tell you know, I combined it all together, and this is what I wanted to do next. And
so, I mean, if your question, it's a very specific question, but I think what matters in communication is creating the boundaries and being assertive at the same time. So, of course, you don't need to cut yourself short because other people are impatient. I think you know, if that keeps happening, you need to be assertive and say, I noticed that when I did this, this happened, and what I would like is this. Because if you keep shaping and recutting yourself to say less in order to get that tiny bit heard, you will feel less inside. So my encouragement would be to be honest, but find a way of saying it in a way that can be heard. So no, don't shut up.
How can we prepare for change when big changes happen? Is there any way that you can kind of, or is there tools that you can just think about or go through in your head? Because I think change is such a difficult thing, like you said, for some people, but what can you do to kind of like make it easier? I don't know.
So, I mean, I think there's lots of things that you can do. I think, first of all, you can't fix what you don't face. So if you know change is coming and you know what that change is likely to be, sit with people who care about you, that you trust, and work out what are the stress points for me, what are the things that I tend to do that don't work for me, and what are the things that I can build on that really work for me, and what are the areas that I can control, and what are the areas I have absolutely no control over. So I think the story we tell ourselves and how we inform ourselves affects our outcome. So if you tell yourself, I'm a victim and I'm waiting for the volcano to come and get me that is going to throw me off the planet, that is how you will receive it. You will be in a heightened state, your polyvagal system, you'll be in height, flight or freeze. Your capacity to think and use your wise mind will be offline, and then you're not in a great position to support yourself. So what helps you is to use people. I think we need people around us to help us, because we can deny ourselves what we're bad at. So you need your best friend to say, no, that is where you really go wrong. When you think, I'll be fine, and they go, no, last time, do you remember? You did this. And so help people to be all of you and support yourself to do that. But also that you have no control. Emotions are often how we interpret them. So if you're saying to yourself, I hate this feeling and it's really doing my head in, then that exacerbates it. Because where you put your attention and how you translate it is the information you give yourself, and then that is your outcome. If you say to yourself, I can feel this thing, this movement in my tummy that feels like butterflies, so I do feel scared. Say to yourself, name that you feel scared, because once you've named an emotion, your brain goes, okay, she's scared. Then you ask yourself the question, what am I scared about? What is it that I know that I'm scared about, that I can do something about, and what can't I do about? And also, what can I do to down-regulate my hyper-arousal? So I can take some exercise, I can punch a pillow, I can do some journaling, I can have lots of hugs, I can do things that comfort me. And one of the things I love, so everyone talks about triggers, you know, the trigger that sets your arousal system, your autonomic nervous system into code red 10. There's also glimmers, which are cues of safety. So glimmers are, for me, it's my slippers, because I look at them and I know it's the end of the day, and they're so old, and everyone wants me to replace them, but I love them because they represent, in my pajamas, day is done, finite, or a mug, but it can be a sunset, it can be a piece of music, it can be your dog, it can be seeing someone's face. All of that is a glimmer, and so gather glimmers through the day that protect you from triggers. That's the work of Deb Dana, by the way, polyvagal too.
I love that, and in fact last night my husband said, I'm going to get you some new slippers. And I said, no, I really like them, so absolutely right. Right, one more question, if that's okay. Anyone got anything?
Okay. So, obviously we all have parents, and some people are very lucky and their parents, they pass away when they're very old. And I am one of these lucky ones. But I want to prepare myself for the loss. How do I do this? Already now.
I mean, I think that's a really good and important question, because I think we tend to pretend it isn't going to happen, and then when it does happen, we have no way of understanding it, and we haven't prepared. So one of the first things I would do is talk to your parents. Talk to them about their dying. Talk to them about what they fear about their dying. Talk to them about the funeral they want. Talk to them about their will. Get their passwords, like practical things as well as emotional things. Because I think what we don't say haunts us. And so when you've had some conversations with them, and we also think I have a kind of magical thinking, if I talk about death, it's going to hasten my death or their death. And that isn't the reality. So I would talk to them, and also I would learn about grief. I mean, you can read all my books to learn about grief. So that you have an understanding of what it's like. But also spend time with your parents. You know, The biggest derailer of grief is regrets. The things you didn't say, that you didn't do, the time you didn't spend. And it's always about the relationships and the love. So that when you go back, you will have this bank of memories that you know you said everything that you needed to say, you apologise for the things you apologised for, you thanked them, you told them that you loved them, and you heard them say, I love you and I'm proud of you, and that will support you for when after they've done.
Thank you very much.